Hello, and welcome once again to Winter's Tales here on ArranSound. Today we're beginning a more extended story, which should take us a good part of the way up to Christmas. Like the story of the Lost Bride and the Mogul's Bridge, which I told you over the last couple of weeks, this story is in essence an Arran fairy tale. However, it's worth remembering that the idea that fairy tales are essentially for children is a very, very latter-day notion. When the great folk tales and fairy tales and myths were originally told around the winter fireside, particularly in a Celtic culture like ours, they were aimed more often than not at an adult audience. And this story, which I entitle Dance Beneath a Scarlet Moon, might be thought of as essentially a fairy tale for a more grown-up audience. Not that I'm averse to young listeners, don't worry about that, but I'd better forewarn you. Things as the story unfolds over the episodes to come are going to get a little bit creepy here and there. Things are going to get seriously creepy. And if you're not up to that, well, there's always Enid Blyton for you to turn to if you want to turn away from this show. But if you've the nerve to stick with me, then let's get started, yes, with Dance Beneath a Scarlet Moon, Episode 1. Now, I thought of starting by giving you a wee bit of a preamble about the particular Scottish folk legend or myth which inspired this story. But, you know, it occurs to me that the way this story develops, which is rather subtly and ambiguously at first, it's better rather if I just start the story and let it all become clear in its own good time. So come back with me now, folks, not quite to the land of a once upon a time, but rather to once upon a very specific time, not enormously distant. Come back with me, in fact, 101 years in time, to the deck of the paddle steamer Glen Sannox, as it plies its regular ferry route towards Arran in November of the year 1919. And there it was, looming before them out of the low November clouds. Arran. Heather vaguely recalled glimpsing it across the water on a childhood trip or two to the seaside at Largs or Ayr, but to see it now from the deck of the ferry, suddenly so vast and close, with all its dark crags and island girth and tiny buildings along the shore of otherwise uninhabited wilderness, where it was like a vaporous dream becoming solid as rock. But then as James, standing behind, circled his arms about her waist, holding her close against the wind and spray off the choppy grey sea, didn't it all feel like a dream, an impossible dream, coming beautifully, simply true? Not for the first time, but Heather hoped it might come somewhere close to being the last time. She wondered why, in fact, he was there with her at all, as her new husband, escorting her across this wild water to a honeymoon on an island so close to her native Glasgow, yet so different to Glasgow. Why, it might have been half a world away at least. She turned her head to look back and up at that profile of his the other nurses in the hospital had, both jokingly and earnestly, dubbed Noble. Dressed for the journey in his officer's uniform, he looked, why, the perfected image of the manhood the nation had so recently trumpeted off to war, and greeted rather more awkwardly on the way back. And yet she knew, how could she not, that behind that uniform, behind that fond smile he tilted her way, there lay scars, rough and deep as the sea they traversed. And she had bathed those wounds, nursed his pain, seen him naked as a battlefield's cast-off, without still, having seen him so as a husband. And thus she knew there was more to him than some image for a recruiting poster. And that deeper, frailer, gentler man, more wounded, more needful, and more warm, loved her indeed, or so it seemed, which, she supposed, was more than enough to be going on with. At the jetty, one of his uncle's fellows was waiting to carry them to the house, not in a motor car, but in an old-fashioned horse and trap. "Hello there! Hello! Master James!" He met them at the foot of the ramp. A great lump of a fellow, a white stubble around a gap-toothed smile, a bowler hat at a skewed angle on his bald head. "Yes, Master James, yes, over here. Oh, no, let me take that. No, I'll take that. Don't you worry. Over here." He collected their luggage, shoving odds and ends of it under his armpits and leading them to their seats towards the rear of the trap. "How are you, Hughie?" James asked him. "Me, Master James," the old fellow replied. "Well, I'm what you find me. A wee bit the worse for the way yon salty winds insist on blowing off that sea there. But I'm still standing, just. I'm what one of them thingies the ship's knocked the ropes around. And you, young sir? Why, I hear tell you went and won that war of yours over France way." "It was Belgium I wound up, Hugh. And no, I didn't quite win it all by myself. Not hardly. Let me just help my wife up here. She works worth the lifting, you don't mind me saying so. Excuse me there, but a grey day like this, what's bonny catches your eye all the sharper. Welcome to Arran, Mrs. Hallgarth." "Heather, please," said Heather, climbing aboard. "Let's not get too forward, Hughie," said James. "Let's just concentrate on getting this ramshackle trap up into those hills there while it's still light. If me or the horse can manage that, then manage it we will. There's rugs back there to pull over your knees. Oh, and a wee dram. Sew it in the pocket there at the side." "I'll just bet there is," said James. "Well, you know how it goes, sir," said Hughie. "Hard getting up and down them hills hereabouts if you don't have a wee bit of something to warm up your bones." "Well, let's just get up those hills anyway, and quickly," said James, poised to climb aboard himself. But at that moment, something soft but slightly rough bounced wind-blown against his leg. He looked down. It was a rather shabby little bunch of wild roses wrapped in paper. He picked it up and he looked around. By the rail overlooking the water stood a rather tall young woman. She was staring his way, black hair and the black veil on her little hat blowing about in the gusty wind. One black-gloved hand extended his way. "Sorry, darling," he said to Heather. "These flowers aren't for you. Someone else is a sweetheart around here, plainly." Briskly, James crossed to where the young woman stood, extending her way the little bouquet. "Waiting for someone off the boat?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "He'll be glad to see you, I'm sure." "Yes," she said. "He will." Always a little shy with women, it was only now James looked her full in the face, direct in her wide dark eyes, and a pain cut through him. She had taken the little bouquet from him. He could see that some thorn or other among the roses had cut the tip of his index finger. A single fat bud of blood oozed into sight. He stuck the finger in his mouth, sucked it dry, apologised, though not wholly sure what he was apologising for, and excuse me, hurried back to the horse and trap. They started off. Almost immediately they were rattling up a steep hill. James had told Heather that the southern half of the island, where they were to have their honeymoon, had a gentler landscape than the mountainous north. But though Heather could see those jagged northward mountains receding behind them, the terrain they currently travelled seemed, if not mountainous then, steeply hilly at the very least. Occasionally, at a particularly severe jolt to the buggy from the rough-hewn road, James would wince, Heather protectively tightening her slender fingers around his broad hand. It's nothing, he said. I'm used to it. The childhood days I spent trundling up and down these hills to spend summer holidays at my uncle's holiday home. It's altogether too long since I came here last. Look at it, Heather. Sometimes when I was huddled in that mud over in Flanders, peering at a battlefield blasted flat, I would think of these rolling hills here, those mountains back there, and well, it was some reminder of the life and green health there could be in the world. Arran, I would tell myself. I must get back to Arran. Of course, back then I had no idea it was my honeymoon that would provide the excuse. No, dear, said Heather. You had to suffer a few more blastings to bring the two of us together. The war effort wasn't entirely wasted, he said, if it crossed my path with yours. I can even weather a twinge or two on this damned potholed road if it's carrying me into a life with a woman who, well, dragged me from all that mud and blood. Figuratively speaking, of course. He kissed her gently on the cheek. She never felt so close, not in all her life, to another human being. But the truest closeness yet lay ahead. Her skin tingled with the anticipation. Or was that just the November breeze up there on the hill? Starting to get a little dark above those treetops, Hugh, called James. Oh, don't you worry about that, sir, cried Hugh up front. Me and the horse here, we knows all the wee shortcuts. There's a way up through the farm tracks and the woodland tracks as will get us there twice as fast, I promise you. And indeed, before long the trap was trundling onto narrower tracks, hemmed in at first by muddy fields and then by dense meshes of bushes and trees at either side of them. Taking the back way by the fairy glen, are we? James called. Yon's the way the horse was thinking of, certainly, Master James, replied Hugh. There's a fairy glen? Asked Heather. Oh, how charming. It's Arran, darling, James replied. There are fairy glens all over the place. But yes, the one we are going by ought to provide a decent shortcut. If we get through it fast enough, it is getting dark after all. Indeed, it was getting very dark. The gloom of a late November afternoon rising like a slow and steady flood between the trees and the bushes, the track growing ever narrower, overhung with branches from both sides, an occasional waterfall showing itself like a white ghost starting from the obscurity. Heather felt glad the horse at least knew its way. Deeper into the dark they rattled and trundled, James's hand now protectively squeezing Heather's hand, as earlier she had squeezed his. That old bridge is still reliable, Hughie, he called ahead. It'll take us, I'm sure, said Hugh. Unless it doesn't, in which case we'll have to do something else. But we're no there yet, no quite. Well, let's get there, said James. And quick, before it gets any... Wow! Whoa! Cried Hugh, drawing the horse to a stop. Hugh? Queried James. What is it? It's maybe nothing, sir. Just something darting across the path there, a wee tad ahead at the edge of the glen. What was it? A deer, a stag? Aye, sir, maybe that and maybe nothing more. Hard to tell in this dark." "Yes, I did actually mention the dark," said James. "Can we please get moving on through it fast as we can?" "Fast as the horse'll go, sir. Can't go no faster than that. Come on, old girl, on we go, on we go. Yep, yep." And the horse started up again, carrying them on towards the deepest pocket of gathering darkness yet. "This here'll be the go-mace bit," said Hugh over his shoulder. "Cutting across the glen and cutting over the bridge. But we'll be across and wow! Bloody hell!" Even as the buggy had begun rattling over the barely visible boards of the old wooden bridge. Another ghostly wisp of waterfall unfurling from above on their right-hand side. Something had leapt directly in front of the horse with a guttural screech, causing the old nag to whinny and totter back and to the side, shuddering the whole carriage and sending the rear wheel on the left dropping steeply with a crack. "Heather!" called James, clutching her tight as their bench seat tilted at an angle, a rumble of water and rock sounding from immediately below. "Here, darling, here," he said, "climb out this other side. Hugh, quick, quick, give us a hand." But by the time old Hugh had dismounted and tottered their way, James had helped Heather down to... "Yes, dear, here, down, yes," helped Heather down to stand on the rickety planks of the bridge. Now, even in the gloom, they could see that the left wheel at the rear of the trap had not only shuddered over the edge of the bridge, hanging above the drop to the next stretch of waterfall below, but the wood of the wheel had splintered too. "What the hell were you trying to do, man?" cried James. "Kill us both?" James, said Heather, wrapping her hands around his arm, trying to calm him down. "Didn't you see it, sir?" said Hugh, "coming out the dark there like I don't know what." "I saw something," James replied. A deer, like I said 2 minutes ago. A deer or a stray dog. Nothing for you or this old nag to be getting so panicked about." "I'm no so sure it was neither of those, sir," said Hugh. "What then? A bear? They're extinct in Scotland, didn't you know?" "Well, I don't know what it was, sir, and I don't like to think plainly," said James. "Maybe it was one of the fairies," chirped Heather. Sorry, just trying to lighten the mood," she continued, when both men glowered at her. But a smile belatedly found its way onto James's face. "Yes, darling. Yes, fairies, maybe that's what it was. It's the fairy glen after all, and this contraption isn't carrying us beyond it any time soon." "Well, sir, it'll need a new wheel for one thing. See it here? And a new wheel will have to be fetched up from, well, Marsh is the lightweight option." "Why don't we leave that to you?" said James. "Come on, darling, I know this glen well. The house is essentially, well, just above us on the hillside. If we make our way on foot up the side of the burn here, you see, along the side of the waterfall, up the track there, I can be carrying you across that doorstep in, well, 10 minutes flat, I promise you." "Will it be, safe?" she said. "I mean, if there is something running about, something, capable of scaring a horse." "There's nothing here for anyone to be scared of. This is Arran, not the wilds of Siberia. Look, grab whichever of your cases you're going to need the most. I'll grab one of mine and I'll lead the way." "And, our driver," she said. "He's got a wheel to find, and it's quite a walk you'll have down to Lamlash, isn't it, Hughie?" "It is that, sir." Then we'll leave you with the whiskey." "Aye, sir, I could maybe be doing with that." "Oh, and, well, listen, Hugh, look, here, take this. No, seriously, take it, for your trouble. It ought to pay for the whale, refill the whiskey, and, well, do a bit more for you besides." "What? Oh, thank you, sir, thank you. That's very generous." "Well, I suppose there's more things to be getting angry about in this world than a little careless driving. When you get this sorted, bring the rest of our luggage up to the house. Looks like it's going to stay dry, at least. Have it with you before the evening's out, sir. I'll get a lad up from the village to help me." "Good," said James. All right, my darling. Shall we wend our way up the fairy glen? Perhaps they'll flutter along and light our way like glowworms, said Heather, as he led her to the far side of the bridge and then down onto the bank of the burn. Hugh watched as they began ascending the side of the little waterfall, himself fumbling all the while for yon wee flask of whisky he had tucked away. A sweet young lassie, but she'd nae idea what she was talking about. Oh, no. Fairies she'd seen in some picture book. Yon wasn't the kind of fairy they named Gwen's after hereabouts. Oh, not that he believed that sort of nonsense. Well, no, really. Only the horse again began whinnying, snorting, shifting about, still stuck in its traces. All right, whoa, all right, old girl, all right. Don't you go shifting this bloody thing all the way off the bridge. That's all we need. Here, let me unfasten you. You can come with me down to the village. Keep me company while I sort out a change of wheel. We're both in the bad books with the landed gentry, didn't you see? You could be doing with some hated you, I dare say. And me, well, I could be doing with more of a dram than is left in this dainty wee flask. Come on, let's... Something rustled sharply in the bushes just past the end of the bridge. Hugh hesitated in leading the horse forward. That you there, Master James? He asked, despite knowing Master James had departed in another direction entirely. The bushes, thick and spiked with darkness, did not answer. Not at first, but then they rustled again more violently this time, and a dark figure, slender, tall, began unfurling itself from the gloom. Who's that there? Who's yon? Asked Hugh. The horse, its reins in his hand, had begun shifting nervously, snorting and clopping its hooves on the boards of the bridge. The figure, stepping closer, was in no hurry to answer. Hugh thought again of those tales he'd heard since boyhood. Tales about certain lonely places on the island you didn't want to get stuck after dark on account of... Well, it was old woman's tale, stuff for wains to shiver over, no nothing for a grown man to fret about. But all the same... The horse bolted hard into his back, foam from its lips spattering his skull, its panicked charge knocking him to the dirt past the end of the bridge, the horse charging past, so swift, so violent, he feared for a moment its hooves would pulp him flat. But already, as he twisted about amid the mud and dead leaves, he could see its white flanks charging into the distance with a swiftness he hadn't seen in the old nag in years. And then his attention was all on a ragged hem of white dress and two slender bare feet, mud-spattered, which were shifting directly in front of him. He looked up. A figure loomed close above him, silhouetted against the pale moon beginning to show among the clouds. Hugh scrambled upright, swift as he could in the slippery mud, blubbering words to give the lie to his every scepticism but what might waylay the most sensible of fellas in a fairy glen. Hello there. Hello there. It's them you're after, isn't it? Up there they went. Nothing to do with me. Yon big house, you know, up the top. Me, I was just a driver with a fair jarvey, you ken. Look at me. You look at me, old, decrepit, nae use at all to the likes of you, so if you didn't mind, I'll be heading after my horse there before it gets itself in trouble. Please. Please let me pass." But as he awkwardly shifted a step forward, the figure blocking his path made its own move, becoming a different figure entirely. He started to cry out, but the attack was so swift, the cry amounted to little more than a single sharp breath. The breath drowned by the sound of the nearby waterfall. The rustle of leaves spattered by stray blood was somewhat louder. The oily liquid running down the branches like sap. "Thank heaven for broken carriage wheels," said Heather, as they climbed on up the side of the burn, up the side of its cataracts and modest waterfalls, its black flow and white foamings. "This is a much more romantic way to reach your honeymoon home. So long as we actually get there, that is. It's right up here," said James. "Watch these branches. Here." And indeed, as they stepped clear of the latest tangle of trees and bushes, they emerged on a patch of higher ground to find themselves facing a great tall house, overlooked by only the highest, most naked moorland. It stood utterly dark, save for a lamp glowing warmly behind one bay window on the ground floor. "There we are," said James, jangling keys out of his greatcoat pocket. "It's cosy enough on the inside." "Looks like someone got here ahead of us," said Heather, noting the gleam of that lamp. "Oh, that had been left by Mrs. McCrae down in Whiting Bay. She was going to come up, warm the place, leave some food out. But she was put under strict instructions not to hang around and get in the way of our wedding night." "Oh, heaven forbid," said Heather, a little awkwardly, as he steered her through the iron gate bordering the modest plot of land on which the house stood. "My dear old uncle did offer to have the place heaving with servants, all waiting on our every whim, but I did think, on balance, I'd rather be here with you, darling, living like a mountain bandit in a lonely cave for the next week. I do hope that's all right with you." "I can't think," she said, "of a bandit I'd rather be abducted by." "A bandit who's a dab hand at whipping up scrambled eggs," he said. "Should Mrs. McCrae not have set out something tasty for our supper?" "That sounds so delicious. I almost hope she has let us down," said Heather. They had reached the doorstep where James unlocked and pushed wide the door, revealing a hallway lit by a candelabra on a table by the foot of the stairs. Heather was about to step through when he halted her. "Oh no, Mrs. Hallgarth," he said, "we're not having that. I haven't been off in those wretched trenches fighting for anything less than the defence of certain sound cultural traditions. Here!" And he promptly scooped her up in his arms and, cases abandoned on the threshold, carried her through into the hallway, singing, "Gin a body meet a body comin' through the glen, gin a body kiss a body, need the world ken. Oh, Jenny's a wheat poor body, Jenny's seldom dry, she draggled a her petticoatie comin' through the rye. Comin' through the rye, poor body, comin' through the rye, she draggled a her petticoatie comin' through the rye." He had carried her through to the main reception room on the ground floor, where the lamp was already burning brightly in the bay window. A brighter light still glowed from the blazing fire in the broad hearth. Further warm welcome provided by, there it was, a buffet table, laid out in the centre of the floor, a wealth of repast upon it, from slices of smoked salmon to crowdy and bannocks and coleslaw, alongside by an outsized cream cake and fresh baked shortbread. "I suppose you won't be needing those scrambled eggs," said James, setting Heather down. Darling, I think this could probably last us through the first 3 years of our marriage, replied Heather. Yes, he said, it looks so fulsome one might have to work one's way up gradually to making a start on it. Quite, said Heather. It's all cold cuts, so it can wait, surely, while I, if you don't mind, have a bath. After that climb up the hillside, you know. That's if there's any hot water. Mrs. McCrae, if I know her, said James, will have lit the stove in the kitchen so molten hot you'd have enough bucketfuls of hot water to bathe an elephant. Come, let's get those cases in and I'll show you around the old place. Outside, in the dark, Hugh, what was left of Hugh, stumbled, crawled, dragged himself up the muddy slope, knowing he was all but dead already, barely one raw breath left in him, just enough to warn, to breathe. To breathe, that word. For the stories were true, all true, and them up there, alone in that house. Was that the light in its windows he could see glowing? He pulled himself on, through the pain. From his dressing room upstairs, James could hear the soft lappings and plashings of Heather bathing herself in the hip bath by the crackling bedroom fire. She was singing to herself, la 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 la, and those gentle sounds stirred in James anew a clear sense of how much he loved her. When he had wakened from a delirium of terrible memories, sharp as barbed wire, blinding and deafening as shells bursting, to see her for the first time there at his bedside in that hospital improvised amid the ostentation of Pollock House on Glasgow's south side, when he had felt her soft press of a damp cloth to his forehead, and heard her gentle voice telling him he was all right, you're quite safe, you're home, Scotland, and we're going to take care of you. Well, no angel in the literal sense could have appeared to a man more perfect, more essential to a man's spirit than that little figure with her frizzy brown hair and starched uniform. His family, to whom he can never begin to explain all he had been through, had wrinkled their noses, expressing a genteel discomfort over his marrying a young woman so sorely lacking in, so to speak, the appropriate social grounding. In a moment of ill temper, he'd told them to lie a while in the dirt he'd fallen in and then see if they wondered at the choice he'd made. And yet now, as he listened to her bathing in that adjoining room and got on with changing out of his uniform, he wondered yet again about the wisdom of this consummation of their uncommon courtship. For there it was, painfully reflected in that long mirror as he stripped off shirt and vest, the serpentine curve of that deep scar down one side of his torso, starting just by the lowest rib, then delving below the waistband of his trousers, its dirty purple hue set against the paleness otherwise of his body. Oh, the sticky hues that had spilled through that curve when it lay gaping wide on the battlefield, his guts black as tar, his blood grey as mercury, there in the moonlight that night, the moon itself red as blood in the light of the leaping flames. And now he was to impose this woundedness on her a second time, as husband now rather than patient. What kind of a man was he? La 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 la. Heather, shivering slightly, agreeably as she reclined amid the steaming heat of the hip bath, thinking of all that yet lay ahead. What a day it had been! Wedding in the morning, feeling dwarfed by the grandeur of Paisley Abbey, of which James's family were notable patrons, followed by that grand reception in the hotel by the railway station, then the swift train ride to the coast at Fairlie to catch the ferry, and then the journey's seemingly haphazard conclusion in the muddy climb to this house, and now the beginning of another journey entirely. Damn! She heard James fumbling about in that adjoining room. Are you quite all right through there? She called. What? Oh, yes, just getting dressed. That's funny, she said. I haven't even started. Oh, no, I can imagine. But you don't have to imagine, she said. Not any more. No, he said from behind the slightly ajar connecting door. No, I don't, do I? Come in, she said. Was she saying it? Yes, she was. Come in and see for yourself. For a moment there was no response, then the door was gently drawn open. James shuffled in, unsure where to set his eyes. Heather shivered again within that heated water, the rippling warmth of the fire, but the shiver was agreeable. This suddenly felt very right as the fragrant pop of the logs among the flames. He stood over her. He looked down. She flinched a second, then decided not to flinch. He sank to his knees by the rear edge of the tub, rested a gentle hand on her naked shoulder. After all that, he breathed. It's been quite a day, she said. I didn't mean that, he said. I meant all the rest of it that came before. Oh, she said. All that cold, all that din and terrible silence, all that smoke and mud, that stink of blood and burning metal thick in the air. And suddenly, this warmth and softness and, well, it's life, isn't it, suddenly, after all that dying. And oh, my darling, what a sweet shock it is. He kissed her neck. She wriggled pleasurably in the water. He raised his head, sang softly at her ear. Gin a body meet a body, coming through the grain. Gin a body kiss a body, the things a body's in. And he kissed her again. And something screeched raw-throated close outside the window. Heather flinched. putting both arms protectively about herself as James stood and said, "What the bloody, James?" A rattling, a clattering from somewhere below, a sound of something trying to get in. "Is it?" she said. "Something trying to wait here." And he was hurrying out of the room. She raised herself from the tub, floundering around for a towel. Louder clattering below. James leapt down the stairs, 3 at a time in the flickering candlelight. Through the opaque glass of the front door's upper panel, he could see a shape throwing itself again against that glass, rattling in its frame, as if some great dark bird were flapping about, trying to get in. "Who's that? Who's there?" called James, wishing he had some weapon to hand, recalling the service revolver stuffed at the bottom of his suitcase upstairs. But even as another clattering made him think of running upstairs to fetch it, a cry sounded through the glass of the door, a cry for "Help! Help me!" A woman's voice, distinctly. He hurried forward, unlocked the door. The young woman practically hurled herself on top of him, the two of them tumbling to the floor. A young woman she was. A wilderness of black curling hair splayed across her face, 2 dark eyes staring out from the thick of it, a tremulous mouth hanging wide. She wore some kind of long white dress, tattered, ripped in several places and stained with spatterings of dark red blood. "It's out there! It came for me!" she breathed. You must help me!" He got back to his feet, helping her up, even as Heather came hurrying down the stairs, a rope wrapped and knotted around herself. "James?" she asked, but he was busy dragging hair from across the newcomer's face, asking her, "What is it? What are you?" "It came for me," she said. "Out the dark. Attacked. Had to fight to get free. It's out there still. What's that door?" James rushed across, slammed the door, bolting it. "Take care of her," he called to Heather, then made his own bolting run back up towards the bedroom. Heather stepped towards the young woman, who swayed upon bare feet, stained with mud and spotted all over with fragments of twig and pine needle and dead leaf. The latest sway made it look as if she might fall. Heather darted forward, grabbed her, held her steady, steady, steady. She looked Heather direct in the face, with eyes like the eyes of some wounded animal, hot out of the forest's chill. "Who are you?" Heather asked. "Where did you come from?" "I come from out there," she said. James came stomping down the stairs, dragging on his military greatcoat, his right hand stuffing something in its deep pocket. Hurrying past them, he told them to wait there. "I'll be back in a moment." He unlocked the door, tugged it open, started out into the night. "James!" Heather called. "Don't, it's nothing, darling," he said in the threshold. "Can't be anything. A stag, maybe. Nothing worse. And I've dealt with so much worse, haven't I? Lock this door after me. I'll knock when I want back in. But James, take care of her," he said, pulling the door closed. The young woman tensed closer against her. James ran the length of the short garden in front of the house, scanning its darkness for movement. The iron gate at the far end hung open, swaying, squeaking slightly in the breeze off the hill. He tugged it wider, crossed the rough track which ran by the house, then stood at the track's far side, facing the wooded slope which descended all the way to Whiting Bay far below, and to the moonlit glitter of the sea beyond. So quiet it was. Just a breath of wind rustling dead trees. Beautiful indeed. Arran. So far at last from all he'd feared the most. Yet the fear in him packed tight, like mud or dried blood into the lines of his various scars. reminded him that a quiet like this often masked the worst dangers. He could recall nights huddled in a trench where not all the dead had yet been removed, fearing the anger in their ghosts that might yet start their bones into movement, at the same time as fearing some surprise attack over the lip of the trench, some sudden sound of Serge scraping over barbed wire to alert him too late to some attacker dropping his way, bayonet primed. That sort of thing happened, he'd heard, if you let your guard down. And stuck in the heart of that endless war, he'd believed anything was possible, so long as it was terrible enough. A sharp rustle in the trees to his right, a gruff snarl. He dragged out the pistol, fired, bang! The night went white for a single instant, then dropped into thicker darkness yet. Past the echo of the shot he heard something heavy dropping away with a harsher rustle. He hurried across, dragged branches aside. He could see nothing. Nothing but the empty, leafy dark descending all the way to the shore far below. Fuss over nothing, he thought. Nothing to be frightened of. Not here. Some local girl's fantasies. He drew back. Ah! A thorn among the branches he was holding back pierced his finger. He was halfway to putting it to his mouth, for licking the blood aside, when he recalled that earlier prick to his finger from that bouquet of wild roses down on the jetty. And he suddenly wondered if he hadn't seen before that young woman with the wild dark hair. He hurried back to the house. In the bushes at his back, old Hugh slid a few further inches down the slope. The last fraying strand of life and effort in him scissored by that bullet, the last breath with which he had hoped to shape a warning, now wasting itself amid those low-hanging branches, amid which his body lay unseen. Baobhan, he breathed. And then he breathed no more. And there we leave our story. Until next week. Same time, same place, when the proverbial plot thickens in our tale of a dance beneath a scarlet moon. I'd just like to extend my thanks to local expert Jim Henderson, who helped me research the realities of life on Arran 101 years ago. And also, of course, as ever, extend my thanks to you for listening. I'll see you next time. And in the meantime, pleasant dreams.